Hi everyone, welcome. I'm Lindsay at Water Peace Project, and today I'm joined with our water research team, Anton Fedorenko at Aquasci and Jeremy Pfeiffer from SVP Water Research. Hi guys, welcome and thank you for joining us today.
Hi, Lindsay.
And so we're so grateful for everyone who's joining us, especially for those of you who have been participating every month for these experiments. Together, we're exploring the power of consciousness through water-based science. And for those of you who are joining us for the first time, we're Water Peace Project, and we're in collaboration with Cybertronica, Aquasci, and SVP Water Research to conduct these series of experiments where global participants are joining at the same exact time to focus their attention to the same water at the same time. And we've been holding these global ceremonies for almost 10 years now. It was a request from my teacher, Dr. Masaru Emoto. And so that really means a lot to me, and especially to Water Peace Project and to all humanity, because when we know that our consciousness actually shapes our reality, we regain and reinforce our personal power for healing water, which means ourselves and animals, plants, and all around the planet. And we can do that simply by thinking and speaking and acting with intentions of peace towards water. And these experiments have been ongoing. They are part of research for a research paper titled Focusing Collective Attention, the Targeted Maharaji Effect. And so far, we have conducted 4 out of 12 experiments. And I know a lot of people tuning in, they want to know more about, what are we measuring? What are the results? What do the graphs mean? And so if you guys want to follow along, you can go to our webpage, waterpeaceproject.org/research, and there's all the graphs there. And now I'd like to open up the circle to Jeremy and Anton to share a little bit about the scientific aspects of the experiments, for example, like what type of device we're using, what types of measurements it takes, and maybe the experiment control and how that compares to our results. And then you guys could just share a little bit about that now.
Excellent. Thank you so much for having us, Lindsay and Anton. Good to see everybody here today. Just sending our love and gratitude across our screens to everybody, and wishing you a wonderful day, and thanks for being here. So yeah, we've been through about 4 experiments now. Our goal, is really to kind of reach a broader audience and reach into a larger experiment group, and not locally at a distance, which is an exciting topic. It's a topic that is a hard one to grasp, but it really has the nature of the conscious observer and the entanglement in the quantum dynamics that are explored at a distance. And so that's a real exciting topic. We're using electrochemical impedance spectroscopy to measure our effect of the conscious observer on the system at a distance. And essentially what that is, it's measuring the electrical conductivity in the water and the effect that the conscious observer has on that system as it's measuring the conductivity. And so the way the device works is you have basically an anode cathode. You have 2 probes with an electrical current running through it in the system. And as the water is absorbing CO2 from the atmosphere and it's ionizing as the electrical current is running through the water sample, it becomes a very, very subtle fulcrum to make an effect on. The system runs in the millivolt range. It's a very, very sensitive device. It's been used for standardized electrochemical measurements. And we happen to notice that during some of those standardized chemical measurements in our efforts to control for variabilities, we noticed that it was very, very sensitive to the conscious observer effect. And so with that, we employ the device to actually measure consciousness in water. So with that being said, it's kind of a general overview of the device and what we're measuring and how we're measuring it. And Aquasci was born out of the need to be able to reach a larger audience. We had done a lot of research together in the scientific communities amongst our core internal group, and we wanted to kind of reach out to a broader audience. So that's kind of why that platform was birthed. And once again, wanting to give it a greater audience, we teamed up with Lindsay and the Water Peace Project, which we've been working with for many years, exploring the conscious observer effect through crystallography and other types of media. And so it's kind of brought us to this point. We've run 4 different measurements, which is a good thing, right? Because in a scientific method, you want to continue to repeat the experiment as many times as you can to continue to build the statistical value, which you can make a scientific measurement and conclusion on. So with that being said, I'll hand it over to Anton. Hope that gave enough context, and we'll kind of walk you through the 4 experiments, and hopefully we can tee us off for more information. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Lindsay. Happy to be here and talk about what we already done for this 4 months. I'll have a short presentation about setup and what we're measuring and the results. Yeah, so why we're also doing this, we know that many people, most people, do not believe that consciousness can influence matter, and that's normal. That's understandable. It happens because we don't have much experiments. We don't have much reliable verification tools, which can show people that yes, when you concentrate your attention on water or some other thing, you can change, you can influence the matter. And because of this disbelief, we cannot have use benefits, potential benefits of what we can do with this power of consciousness. In Aquasci, it's our motivation. Experiments is to reach further and understand further consciousness, and later to apply it in real life. And some applications can be self-healing. So use power of consciousness to explore and heal oneself. Then distant healing, and use power of consciousness to heal other at any distance. And I know different practitioners already using this approach, and this can be explored and used more if we continue to understand more about the consciousness. Then we can also do some climate balancing, use power of consciousness to support favorable weather. And last and very important, the worst peacekeeping, use power of consciousness to maintain peace around the world. And yes, as I know, mentioned, tools are very important, and we have currently such a tool, and I hope in the future we have more tools. This tool was developed by Cybertronica Research in Germany. They specialize on developing different, very precise technologies to measure weak impacts. So this particular device have, for example, 2 channels. Usually they would use it as a control and test channel. So one channel will be staying without any influence, and another channel will be influenced by some impact. It can be done by the same device, or later they start using people who have some special abilities to concentrate on water sample and see if they can measure something. One of the important things of this device, that it's do not start measurement just when you click start measurement. It actually measures 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's always on, it's always running. Therefore, when we start experiment at specific time, we already have data for many days before. So we can compare measurements done at our session with measurements which were done before the session. And this is very important because even this channel, this device have 2 channels, and we influence only one channel. Sometimes both channels get influenced because that's actually one of the recent let's say discoveries, or what we're noticing, that if we influence one channel, 2 channels can be influenced. Therefore, the best control is to see what data was recorded for 1 day, at least 24 hours before our session. This is a scheme, how it works the main idea that we have this device, and then we have actual, so this device stays in the laboratory, closed laboratory, the room, nobody going inside because it can also influence. And then these water samples, we have pictures of those actual water samples. And during the experiment, people look, they can see the water sample image and concentrate on that water sample. Also during the, on the Water Peace Project, we try different techniques and different meditations. Lindsay invites different people. So we have different, let's say energies, with different energies try to influence this device. And then this device record data and we see whether we had impact. So now what this device measures, this is some graph, it may look a little bit complicated, but here's few main things. So earlier we were measuring only electroimpedance, this electroconductivity. So any material has some electroconductivity, or is this a property of the material? If the water is distilled water, it's not very good conductor. So current through the water will not go very well. Wire, we can pass some current through the wire, and we have dielectric, for example, like plastic, which do not good conductor for the electricity. So water, if it has a little bit of minerals, it can conduct electricity. And we measure, we apply with those electrodes specific voltage, and we see how much electricity go through one point to another point in the water. And these two curves, red and black, are impedance of the water. So we see what's exact impedance of the water at specific time. And it changes. Water is dynamic, something always happening inside of this water. And this is very precise, therefore we can see different variations over time. It can depend on the temperature. If in the room temperature changes, therefore we have really good thermal isolation. And recently also added few more sensors to the water. It's temperature sensors, and it's measured really precisely, 0.1 Celsius plus minus. And so far we don't have much algorithms to process thermal temperature results, but we still have them on the graphs. If you go to Aquasci, you do your own training, you will see them. Later we'll be adding more analytics to also analyze the temperature changes. But these 4 experiments we done with Water Peace Project, they're mostly about impedance, how impedance changed during their session. And here I will tell you what exactly we're measuring. And one more thing before this. We're measuring, so on this graph, you can see white area and gray area. So white area is background measurement, which happens 1.5 hour, 1.5 hour before the session starts. This session, active session, when we concentrate on the sample. And after session finished, we analyze this curve and this curve here and see whether curve declined very much compared to the background measurement. You can see in this exact graph, it's pretty much the same how it was in the background measurement. So probably not very strong effect. And then based on this, we calculate so-called psi value. Technically, it's some deviation of the curve at this period divided to deviation of the curve at this background measurement. That's how psi value calculated. And then if you already saw some results before, we have so-called pro value, probability that this change actually is significant. And that pro value calculated based on previous experiments. So for example, as you know, we're doing experiments at 11 o'clock from 11 to 11:30. So we call that active session. The active session when people actually concentrate on their water sample, trying to influence it. And as I told you, device running all the time. And we have data from previous passive sessions. So usually we take 47 previous passive sessions, so it's total actual before like 24 hours because each session 30 minutes. So we have the active session and then we have measurements of the passive session. And if you see, this is like a psi value. If you see sometimes water also without any influence also can have high psi values. Like we don't know why it's caused, like etc. But it sometimes happen. So after we have all these 48 values, we arrange them, like students, for example, class that did exam and then they have their mark, and we arrange students like from the person who got less, like lower mark, and the person who got like high mark. And then we see where our active session is located. So a little like simplifying things, how like pro value is calculated, but this is like the main idea. So we have all that 48 values, we arrange them like this, and then we see where our active session psi value is located. So if it's located, let's say, closer to the top, it's really high, then it means it's most probably that our influence was significant, that change with water happened because of our intention. So for example, if pro value equal to 90%, it means that psi values of the active session is higher than 90% of psi values of passive sessions. So here's located 90% of the passive sessions. Here some, yeah, they were like high. So, and here it's important to know, mention that when you do like, for example, one training, or like if you only perform one experiment, it's not like enough. We should have like many experiments. Therefore, with WaterPreeze project, we're doing at least 12 experiments. So later we can see what is the mean value of the pro values. Because for example, if you take this dice, which has 48 sides, the mean value of, if you'll be throwing like 100,000 times this cube, and you sum up all the values you received and divide them on the amount of times you throw it, you will get mean value 24.5. And like the pro value be like a 50%, like in average. So maximum is 100, the average will be 50%. So if during the all experiments, like 12 experiments, let's say, we will get value like higher than 50%, or actually even lower, like somewhere like not the 50, because if 50, if you'll get 50%, then it will mean that our results, like what we received, well, it was like just randomly obtained. I mean, it's nothing, our consciousness didn't do anything. For example, when you throw in the dice and you have some maybe special technique developed, how to like always throw the 48 number, or like, when you regular dice 6 sides, if you always have 6 and you have somehow like the developed, it means that it's not like random. Random would be like, you would be getting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, any like number, like all the time. But if you're always getting like 6s, it means, something not random there. You're influencing how you throw in your dice. And the same with this approach. If we do like 12 sessions and we see that our mean value of the pro is really different from the 50, it means that, yeah, we cause some effect with our consciousness. And the more experiment, the better for this statistic. Okay, now about the results. I'll just show you how many people participated during the actual session. We know that on the Facebook, when people are participating, like during the session, we had specific time, like an average, and then after the session, we had like thousands of people. So how, because we're doing the measurement during that half an hour, and we're taking results of the half an hour, we will be taking consideration only those amount of people. So for example, in August, in average during the 30-minute period, we had 170 people watching through the Facebook, and our pro was 60%. Again, the higher the pro, it's kind of like more significant results. In September, we had 145 people, and pro is 62.5. In October, 200 people, pro is 73.5%. In November, 310 people, pro value received is 82.5. And so mean so far, it's like about 70%, which is like really interesting and like exciting. Yeah, so we're like just looking forward for doing more experiments for 12 and see what mean value or the pro values we will get. And yeah, like thank you everyone for participating and watching now. And if you have like any questions, you can post them. We'll be happy to answer them. Thank you.
That was awesome. I really appreciated that, because just looking at that, the stats, you know, how it increased like that. And also, you know, just in repeating it, you know, you feel it stronger in everyone participating. So it's interesting to see the data correlate to that, how it's growing in the numbers and the energetics also.
Yeah, I was actually a little bit surprised because like when we recently wrote the paper research, and he was specifically like analyzing different amount of people. I mean, in his local experiment, he had usually like maybe 3-5 people like doing this stuff. And like typical like thinking would be, okay, if you have like 1,000 or 300 people, then your results would be like very like much higher. So far, like if you compare 300 people and 3 people, it's maybe a little bit higher, but not like crazy much higher. So like it's also still like a question whether like the actual amount of people make it much stronger, or maybe there is some specific, you know, like we're always discussing this, how to synchronize people. The more people you have, it's maybe like more difficult, so everybody in sync and everybody thinking the same or like doing the same thing. Yeah, so that's something to like work with.
And the coherency there, you know, I think that's, again, the more we're doing it, we're doing the same thing over and over again. And just like anything, riding a bike, you know, so, and having the information behind it. That's what I was saying in the beginning. It really reinforces belief is everything. So this is really awesome. How about you, Jeremy? You want to share something about that?
Yeah, thanks, Anton, for a wonderful description and an exploration of our results. You know, kind of a reiteration of what Anton was saying was the nature of our experiment process is the science of numbers in terms of like statistics. And so the psi experiment itself, or any type of quantum experiment, is kind of like a random occurrence. So the more statistical value we can build, the more times we can actually throw that dice, and we can see that dice land on the mean numbers, then we can get an idea if we're making an effect or not. So the algorithms that are running in the background that are taking measurements over time are actually sampling thousands of times a second. So each time that sample is taken, it actually has a statistical value in itself. So we have that kind of mean value over time, but then we have a value statistically of each sample that it's taking in each moment in time. So that's another fascinating aspect in terms of building those statistical values with our algorithms as we're taking the measurements. I also wanted to kind of let you guys know that we have a page here that we posted in the chat on waterpeaceproject.org/research. We posted it in the live chat here. And you can kind of follow along with the results. And let's see if we can go ahead and share that page. One moment. And
Also at the bottom of the page, for those of you who really want to dig in even deeper, there is a research paper that we're putting together, and it's an ongoing thing because, these experiments are still going on, but it's getting updated each time. But you can download the paper at the very bottom of the research page. So it's waterpeaceproject.org/research is the link.
Excellent. And so I think Anton pretty much explained the basis of our results in the experiment. So I maybe can jump into questions here. I see a really good question right away here in the live chat. Let's see, we got Tony Garcia. No, I'm sorry, Tanya Garcia. Hi, Tanya, how are you? What QA/QC is used for calibration purposes in terms of the background that was seen? So to kind of give an idea of our controls in our laboratory, we're taking environmental measurements. So not only temperature, we're taking measurements of the controlled environment in terms of the magnetic fields, any kind of RF perturbations, anything that would be affecting the experiment itself as it's running. So to kind of paint you a picture of that, we have also multiple spectrometers that are running simultaneously at the same time. So we have about 9 spectrometers running in our matrix. And so those 9 spectrometers are being scanned in this controlled environment while we're running these environmental measurements to make sure we have a controlled environment. And what happens is the algorithm picks the most stabilized channel out of the 9 spectrometers that has this most stable background to measure against. And it utilizes that spectrometer to run the experiment. And so that gives us a way to control for quantum dynamics, which aren't always the easiest to control for. It's interesting to note too that sometimes there are differences in how the temperature anomalies are simultaneously being measured during the conductivity measurement. Under normal electrochemical conductivity experiments, you would consider them being coefficients of each other in terms of having an effect electrochemically. You would see an effect in the temperature, but sometimes those are disassociated from each other. And that has to do with the quantum nature of our experiment. And what's happening within our experiment, as the electrical conductivity reaction is happening within the water sample, there's what's called the proton tunneling effect. So as the coherent domains are aligning within the matrix of the water, as the electrical conductivity is running through the experiment, the coherent domains in the molecules all the way down to the microscopic atomic scale are kind of unifying and creating like this matrix. And so there's this proton tunneling effect where there's these quantum jumps that are happening within the experiment. And with that being said, that kind of gives access to kind of this quantum dynamic, which kind of gives an interesting pathway towards the theory of how we can actually affect the water sample at a distance, and how we can maybe tap into the quantum at a distance, and also quantum that's happening within the measurement of the experiment. So just to have a summation on that, essentially, there's a laboratory that's highly controlled. Nobody enters a laboratory during the experiment. The whole process is automated and run by algorithms, and it's being measured through different type of experimental sensors to environmental sensors to be able to control for the environment. And so what we do is we take all those environmental sensors and we measure against the actual electrochemical measurement. And if we see that there hasn't been any perturbations on the environmental side, then we know that our experimental measurement electrochemically is valid. So hopefully that answers that question. That's a really good one, by the way. And Lindsay, did you want to jump in? I'll scan for some more questions here.
Oh, good. Yeah, I just wanted to touch base on a little bit in regards to the paper that we're doing. Serge's paper, definitely check it out. You can download it, and it will be getting updated, but it's really fascinating because this is decades worth of research, and the effects are really amazing, lowering crime rate and stuff like that. So when you can see that over a course of time, all the different research that's being done, and how the modern research that's happening today, I feel like the possibilities of really quantifying that are coming closer and closer. So it's really exciting.
Excellent. So I have some more questions. Should I keep fielding them?
Yeah, please do.
Okay, awesome. And then Anton, if you have anything to add, just jump right in. I'll keep kind of moving along here. So is the pro value, okay, so we have Mashindra Somade. Okay, question from Mashindra Somade. I hope I'm saying that correctly. So she's asking, is the pro value directly proportional to the number of those attending? So that's kind of the question which we're trying to get at here, I think, in building the statistical value in our experimental methods and processes. So the more times we can conduct this experiment under a controlled condition, maybe having the exact same number of people attending each time, and we can support a measurement against that, that would probably be the best method and protocol to be able to come up with, an answer that we can explore for that question. Because those conditions aren't always easy to control, because we're kind of have these variables of we're jumping on live and we have a live audience. Maybe sometimes we have 20 people, sometimes maybe we have a few hundred or 1,000 people. So it's hard to control. So we have run some controlled experiments under smaller group settings in some of our earlier research, and we have seen a connection to the number of people. But like Anton was saying, we got to kind of continue down that pathway in building the statistical value and a resolution so we can better understand how all of this stuff correlates. So it's a lot to rein in. So I think we've really kind of, right now our science has been standing on the idea that we're able to see a measurable impact in orders of magnitude. How to be able to correlate that is kind of the pathway of the research and kind of the next steps. So Anton, did you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, I think you mentioned definitely correctly. Like currently in these experiments, we have a little bit random amount of people, like people come. And like first experiment, we had 170s and 145, then like 200, 300. And yeah, just like build that like proportion. We cannot like say, yeah, it looks like it's more people you have with those results. It looks like more people have the higher the pro value. But yeah, you cannot conclude from those 4 experiments that it is. You need to have like maybe 10 experiments with 100 people, like 10 experiments with 300 people, and 10 experiments with 500 people. And it would be good if you had the same people, in those experiments. And then you could maybe conclude, yeah, there's some like proportion.
Okay, awesome. So I'll just keep fielding some questions. These are really, really good questions. And I actually recognize some of these researchers and people attending here. It's awesome to see the interest.
I love it.
Yeah, me too. It's such an obscure pathway that we've taken to research this, and to actually turn this into something that people could understand and explore together with us scientifically is really exciting for us. Okay,
especially because how it grows the belief too. It really is reinforcing. Go ahead.
Yeah, okay, so I see a couple really good questions, so I'll just kind of field them in order. So just a quick follow-up from Mashindra. Have we used any inert gases to avoid environmental interference? Okay, so this is a really good question, because when I was working for another group running electrochemical impedance spectroscopy measures to measure the effect of SiO4 quartz crystal on the actual electrochemical experiment, we were doing everything we could to try to create a controlled environment to avoid any kind of perturbations on the system while we were doing our measurements. And so one of that is we went and purchased a glove box and created this vacuum chamber where we basically sucked out all the air, and then we injected inert gases into the system. And we were able to kind of control for that CO2 absorption that's happening during the electrochemical process. And so with that being said, yeah, that's a finer approach to actually creating more balance and control over those atmospheric conditions that are occurring during the experimental measurement. But I will say it's a bit overkill, because what Serge Kernbach at Cybertronic, who's developed the sensors and spent a lot of years on kind of fine tuning and tweaking those algorithms, he's kind of like tuned his algorithms to kind of like avoid some of the white noise. So he's basically kind of calibrated the device to be able to account for a lot of the, for example, atmospheric absorption into the electrochemical process. So yes, you can account for those environmental conditions that are happening, and you can detail the experiment to be a little bit more controlled, and we've done that. But there's a lot of discussion that that's overkill, and so I'm open to both pathways. I think they're both interesting approaches. One thing to consider, we've really tried to take this whole experimental methodology and make it a little bit more applicable towards the general audience and general scientific experimenter. So there's been a lot of care that's taken to try to simplify our methods and protocols. So like the average person who has a knack for science, or like a technician or technical type approach to taking measurements, that they can actually take this device and put it into action themselves with the most simple method and protocol as possible. So I think that's why we kind of leaned a little bit more towards simplifying that through the algorithms. Anton, I don't know if that helped answer that question or not. What are your thoughts?
Thank you. Good answer.
Okay. And then just really quick, moving on, Dana Tomasino. Hi, Dana, how are you? Very good to see you here. I know Lindsay and the team has spent a lot of time with you, and I've done some looking and research into some of the stuff that you've done in the past, and it's quite amazing. There's a lot of correlations, and so you're a real trailblazer. So I just wanted to let you know that. It's really cool to see you here with us.
I keep telling Dana has a water study group. So for those of you who want to connect with her here, that we want to share that within Water Peace Project or something, but we're working on that, maybe some recorded sessions or something like that. But anyway, thanks for joining us, Dana.
Okay, so Dana asks, don't know if you already covered this, but what do you think the changes in impedance are actually reflecting in the water? So this is a really interesting question, but let's just take it from an electrochemical perspective to start. And that would be that as the electrochemical reaction is happening in the experiment, so like we were saying earlier in the call, we have the anode cathode that's in the water sample, and there's an ionization that's happening during the electrical conductivity and impedance system, and it's absorbing CO2 from the atmosphere. So essentially, it's burning through ions. So there's this ionization effect that's happening. And so what happens is when it's absorbing those ions, you have this ability to measure against that fulcrum. And it's essentially, after the system becomes highly saturated and it's gone through its process of kind of like burning through those ions, you have a real balanced fulcrum that the system can be affected. And so I guess what we're measuring against is the ionization of the water and the electrical conductivity, and the inverse of that, which is impedance. So we're measuring against those type of effects that are happening. How is that reflected into, say, a coherent system like water, and how water likes to kind of structure itself? Is essentially, while that process is happening, there's a proton tunneling effect where the matrix of the water, as the electrical current is expressed through the system, through the matrix, those protons are actually lining up. And I like to express it as, you have this chaotic Brownian motion, right? As water is in its natural state, it's changing in Brownian motion in femtoseconds. It's always variable, it's always changing. But when you put electrical current through it, all of a sudden it starts to unify, and those protons are actually starting to line up, and you have this coherent domain matrix that's starting to manifest. And so that kind of becomes like an antenna or a net for any kind of perturbation or effect on the system. And so hopefully that kind of touches upon your question. There's a lot of different pathways we can go into exploring how to answer that. Man, there's a couple internal conversations that we've had amongst our group that really kind of flips kind of the logic around that, because when it comes to coherent domains and you're actually dealing with like quantum level phenomena, there's things that are actually kind of anomalous to that effect as well, that sometimes aren't very explainable. So hopefully that gives a little bit of insight, and thanks so much, Dana, for the question and for joining us. I'll hand it over to Lindsay.
Yes, Dana, I still invite you to open your group up to everyone on the Water Peace Project. I know everyone will really like it. I enjoyed attending, and we did a little talk, and actually we did an experiment with the group, And I know that Dana's interested in having you guys come and talk with everybody. So thank
Yeah.
you so much.
You know, one thing I just kind of going back to Dana's work, I did notice, I hadn't scanned through a lot of it, but I did notice she was using like, you know, colloid type solutions in her experiments and stuff. And so, you know, ways to kind of like unify that matrix that we're talking about and controlling for those ionization effects and creating like a nice, you know, balanced system to be able to measure against. It is possibly, you know, creating like these colloid solutions that could actually create for a more balanced fulcrum to make an effect against, so to speak. So I've done a little bit of research on that, and we've used like gold, platinum, and silver colloids, and they create a really steady curve. So that's something that maybe we could talk about and explore in the future. Anton, do you have any ideas about that? Adding any kind of like, you know,
Yeah, so far, like what we were noticing, that's if you compare like distilled water with like tap water, for example, I think it's maybe if you like, for example, influence distilled water, and like, you know, like on the Aquasai we have people like one have experiment, then another comes in a few hours. So, and like Serge used distilled water, and with distilled water the relaxation time, so you influence the water, for example, then sometimes they have post effects, like, yeah, you know, during 30-minute session we have what we're measuring, then a few hours, like, or at least 1.5 hour after the session, the water kind of relaxes. And I think that happens faster with distilled water than with like tap water. Sometimes with the tap water the effect can like last much longer. So it's, yeah, that's what I so far know.
yeah, you know, there's a couple other things that we can explore just very quickly in terms of like quantum anomalies that are happening within the electrochemical process in the conscious observer effect. And that's that like the time domain becomes kind of disassociated from the actual experiment at times. So we'll see, for example, like as the experiment impact window that we've kind of scheduled is actually, sometimes we see like a pre-effect where we'll see leading into the experiment, we'll see the curve already starting to build. So it's almost like the system is like precognitive in terms of like it's receiving information from the observer and through that quantum. And so we'll see like, you know, we'll see results starting right before the experiment actually starts, or sometimes we'll see like a latency effect. And we'll see like a spike after the experiment happens. And so like the analogy I utilize is very like a physical mechanical type experiment where you have like a rock in a pond, and you drop it in the pond, and you have these concentric waves that happen, but then you have these amplitude spikes that happen as that wave function is expanding out. And so that kind of is kind of a more of a mechanical physics to kind of consider how we might be seeing these fungible type quantum dynamics. A really good friend of mine, Adam Curry, you know, he's kind of another like researcher. He worked with the PEAR labs at Princeton before it closed down. He was also kind of works with Dean Radin, and he has his own experiments where he uses diodes. And so he uses diodes in a phase conjugated way to create this state, which is a balanced fulcrum that you can affect with your mind. And so he does it with more of an electrical circuit where we're utilizing more of like water with an electrical circuit. And so what he's seen in his experiments are very similar things. And what he likes to call it is fungibility. So it's like this exchange of time in terms of like how we might be able to see an effect outside of the actual impact of the
And what
experiment.
about how that relates to Dean Radin's work? And I like that you brought his name up. Um, and for those of you who don't know his work, definitely look into it. But he did some experiments where, if I remember correctly, he was showing how the effect was happening beforehand by measuring physiological responses. So, for example, your example, Jeremy, with dropping a rock in the pond, the ripple effect that's happening before is when you're thinking about dropping the rock. So that is creating the initial ripple before you've actually dropped the rock. And so back to Dean's experiments, I guess what he was doing, he was showing different images and measuring the dilation of the eye. And so the physiological response was happening before the image was even seen. So I think that would be interesting and I know Serge is really interested in collaborating again, so we can take other measurements on top of the same ones we're doing. And also in relation to what you guys were talking about with the experiments and controlling them a little bit more. And we talked about this with Dana's group and others, is let's exactly do that, is, specific number of people, and they have to agree to the, X amount of experiments. But so we could dive deeper into that. Anyway, I just wanted to
Yeah.
bring that up.
Well, I think there's a few really interesting things that you touched upon in terms of like, we are working on specific setups and methods using like HRV and say EEG type measurements in correlation with the electrochemical conscious observer experiment. So we can kind of correlate data from one type of method and protocol with another. And so there's been a lot of effort in terms of that. There's a couple of papers out that I can post. I didn't have a lot to do with those experiments, so I can't say much on them, but I know they're out there, and I know, correlating as much as we can in terms of other type of measurements in correlation with what we're doing is going to only make the resolution a little bit more saturated, that we can get a little bit more understanding on what's happening. So yeah, so touching upon that, I think that's really interesting. And there's a really cool movie that like I totally personally put my stamp of approval on, because I'm really skeptical about some of these movies out there dealing with metaphysics, but the Superhuman movie, super cool, super awesome. You have to watch it. Just go on, I think, to Amazon or Netflix and look up Superhuman, and it's got like Dean Radin.
It's Amazon Prime.
Amazon Prime, yeah,
Or
it's got
Amazon.
like, yeah, it's got Dean Radin, and it's got a couple of our like associates and friends in there who are doing similar experiments to what we're doing, but they're very well organized and controlled experiments. And it's just, some of the results are just like, wow, stunning. And it just shows you kind of what's possible with the mind and matter and how you can make it effective.
That's exactly what they're talking about. Is that's where I watched that experiment, because that was homework Jeremy had given me to watch that, and we did. And also, for those of you who have been joining the experiments, we talked a little bit about consciousness waves and how they ripple out in a spiral fashion. That they touch about on that in there. It's a fascinating documentary, but really, what about any other questions here? Because I don't want to drag it out too long for everyone, and on their holiday weekend with.
Yeah, let me see real quick, one sec.
And so we are super grateful. Anton, you want to say something? I thought you were waving.
Good. Yeah. I just like actually want to note one thing, that's why this kind of like research is important, because when we do an experiment, like any other experiment in the lab, like I don't know, like research in like immune system, or like this, that, like anything, like, or like some kind of like solid state physics, or like anything, then you should understand that maybe your consciousness as an experimentator also like influences your results, any other, like any other area. So when you want to this to happen, or you doesn't want, or it's maybe increase the error in your experiments. So this is like really like interesting. So maybe like based on this research, there will be some kind of like understanding and for better protocols for any other experiments, for cleaner like informational influence. It's like kind of, we have same temperature, same like pressure, same humidity, I don't know, like moon is the same direction or something, but also like state of mind when you do experiments, like any other experiments, and state of your intention. So it's kind of like informational hygiene, this stuff.
I like that. That's interesting. And I just want to touch a little bit. Anton, he's done fascinating work. If you guys, can connect with Anton and see the work he's done. But I don't know when you're ready to share and talk about some of your other work that you're doing, Anton, but I'd like to do that in the near future when you're ready to do that.
Yeah, for sure. We'll be happy.
Any other good, you want to talk about the research paper a minute?
Yeah, just really quick, I just wanted to kind of show one aspect of the research paper that I think we've kind of explored and teased out that is very interesting. And we'll post the link here at some point on the
Well, you
water.
can download it actually on that link I already gave, the
Okay.
waterpeaceproject.org/research. It's at the bottom of the paper. I mean,
Awesome.
bottom of the page.
Okay, awesome. So just really quick, you can see here, are you guys seeing my screen share? You can see, okay. So essentially you can see the controlled conditions that we've set up in the lab. These are 3 of the 9 boxes. They are thermal insulated, and they have RF shielding and a few different other controlled aspects to them within a controlled environment. But essentially we have a matrix of 9 spectrometers like I was talking about. And here's one of those quantum anomalies that I was talking about that I'm going to scan to the back of the paper here and show you. So these are heat maps essentially of the 9 spectrometers in series. And what happens is when the conscious observer experiment starts and we initiate the process, it's like all of the 9 spectrometers start to kind of like link up in this like quantum effect where the system starts to communicate and it's in a coherent matrix. So all these little perturbations here all represent kind of like one effect, and it's kind of like this wave that's kind of like of ether, I guess I could say, if I could say in kind of a non-conventional way, that's kind of like being measured over this matrix of the experiment. And here on the heat map set, you can kind of see that matrix showing up in terms of like, you know, from a data perspective. And so that's real fascinating that, you know, we're really focusing on one spectrometer, but really the whole matrix, all 9 spectrometers are actually being affected. And you can actually see that here in this image. And so that was one kind of little fun thing I wanted to point out in our paper. And so that was kind of it for me on that.
I liked it a lot. And I like also, if you guys are interested, like I said, there's decades of research on there and all the resources are there. So you can dive into one paper to the next on how deep down the rabbit hole you want to go with all that. But the effect is showing like a lot of really amazing things. And it's exactly what we need more now than ever is, you know, the fact that we can come together and collectively affect the environment around us.
Yeah, and if we could just really quickly just say hello to our water conference on the physics, chemistry, and biology of water. It's chaired by Gerald H. Pollack, attended by Luc Montagnier, and a lot of other legendary water researchers, conventional and non-conventional. And that's kind of a lot of the work that we're doing in collaboration is birthed out of that community. So I just wanted to give a shout out to that community. That's kind of our research group that we're kind of like collaborating with in the background as a lot of those people. And so just wanted to say, you know, hello to our family.
That's awesome. And actually, that's how we all kind of came together working on this project together and met when we met Anton there. And I had brought in, had Dr. Emoto to speak there, but unfortunately he did not do that. But it really opened up a lot of channels for all of us. And, you know, I'm just grateful for that also. So thank you both. And thank you so much, everyone, for, you know, taking the time to listen to the details about this experiment. Science can kind of, you know, maybe it's not always super exciting, but really when you get down to what the matter of the fact is, it is really exciting. And so we hope that you'll continue to join us every month on the 11th. We have the 5th experiment is on December 11th at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And you want to convert that to your local time zone to join at the same exact time. We also have a full moon reoccurring water meditation and experiment. And this is really awesome. You actually log right onto the Aquasci platform. And it's not a silent meditation. You can listen to mood music, but it's just you and the water sample and everyone else who's joining. And we had a really great effect last time. So this will be our second, and this happens when the full moon is directly over the water sample in Germany. So again, you want to join at the same exact time. And a little tip for anyone just first joining on that Aquasci site, Aquasci, AQUAPSY.com. The link's right there, but you can change that time zone into your own local time zone, and that really helps too because it'll notify you when the experiment's happening and stuff. So We're super grateful for everyone joining us today and every month. We need your continued support and participation to get more statistics and data to really show what's happening here and learn more about the power of our consciousness. So thank you so much, everyone, Jeremy, Anton especially, and also Serge, who was not here today. He'll join us next time. And love and thanks to all of you for being with us here today. Thank you.
Thanks, Lindsay. We appreciate everything.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.